1. This is something that happened to me and a boyfriend at the time, in 2013 in the woods in Juneau, Alaska, on Lemon Creek Trail. We had grown up together on and off in Kansas, and with both of us recently getting out of a bad relationship, we decided to start dating. We were the same age, but I was held back in 6th grade for being an idiot and thinking I was too cool for school, and my mom quickly teaching me I was, in fact, not. We were both what you would call a redneck, and enjoyed being out in the woods and in pastures hunting or fishing, just being outside. Well, after dating for 6 months, he tells me his parents are moving to Juneau, Alaska, and he has to go with them. Since he's a diabetic with no job, he can't afford his insulin on his own, and he hears jobs are easy to come by in Alaska. At this time, I was about to graduate high school, at the end of the semester, and had always wanted to go to Alaska, and really just get out of Kansas and be on my own. So I asked if after I graduated I could come too. He talked to his mom and stepdad, and they said it was fine. So I told my mom my plans, and she lost it. I'm her oldest and only girl out of 3 kids, but my dad talked to her, and I was able to go. On December 27th of 2016 at 8 a.m., I boarded the plane and flew away for the first time ever for Juneau, Alaska. Traversing the large airports was the scariest thing I had ever done, and I was almost 19 but still freaking out the whole time. Since I have what you would call a baby face at 19, I seriously was often mistaken for a 12-year-old child. Being barely 5'4" tall didn't really help. I'm also very long-legged and skinny as a beanpole, with very fair skin, blue eyes, and blonde hair. And thanks to my mom saying sick men and pedos love to steal pretty little girls like you, I'm freaked out on my own, practically sprinting from terminal to terminal, at 18 worrying about stranger danger. I make it to Juneau safe, and get to my boyfriend's house, and we go to see his parents. Now I should tell you he had a large amount of family in Juneau. His mother grew up in Juneau, and his stepdad was an Alaskan native. And when I told him I couldn't wait to hit the many trails that were here, his look changed quickly from fun to very serious. He said, "Don't go hiking alone. Always tell someone before you go where you'll be going. And always have pennies in your pocket and some kind of tobacco." Like you, I thought the last part was really weird. And Alaska bears are a real threat when hiking, so you always want to be loud when you're hiking so you don't stumble on one. If they hear you coming, they will leave you, so I figured the pennies were for some noise in your pocket, to keep the bears away, but the tobacco? What the hell was that for? That's when my boyfriend's mom started laughing and said, "Oh, not this again, seriously, Fred. With the kushtaka?" "It's real, Anne, I don't care what you say." Well, this had my attention. Some native folklore of creepy stuff in the woods waiting to get you. Please tell me more, so I probed, "What is a kushtaka?" He winced at me saying it and replied, "It's essentially a skinwalker. If you say its name 3 times, you are asking it to come to you. They can read your mind and take the form of the one person you would believe to see, to follow deeper into the woods. You could never think of it. They will also hide deep in the woods and make calls to lure you in. Men hear a woman screaming as if she is in danger, and women hear a baby crying that's been abandoned. They call you deeper and deeper into the woods, and then they eat you. You're never seen again. They can't pass copper, and tobacco deters them." That's when my boyfriend's mom started making fun of him, and so did my boyfriend. I took it as just a hooky, scary story that was told to keep people from going into the woods alone and getting lost. Cut to a year later, and me and my boyfriend are out and about, and decide we're going to go on Lemon Creek Trail. We text his mom telling her we're going, and she replies, "Be careful, we just got 6 feet of snow over the past few days, and it's getting dark." We don our spikes onto our shoes for traction, and make our way up this steep trail ahead. We're hiking for a good 30 minutes when we notice the forest is eerily quiet. like no birds chirping, no ravens cawing. Not even the grouse we had been hearing the whole time. Not even wind. It's quiet. I was about to mention how quiet it was when, from further into the woods, off the trail, I hear something. Loud and clear. A baby crying. I look at my boyfriend, kind of scared, as his stepdad's story comes rushing to the forefront of my thoughts. He has the same freaked out look on his face, and he's looking in the same direction that I was. Did he hear the baby too? I think to myself. He's looking that way. He must have, so I ask him, "Did you hear that baby cry?" He looks at me puzzled. "No." "Did you hear that woman scream?" Our eyes got wide after he said that. The forest is still quiet when we hear it again, but this time closer. We book it. We're searching our pockets for pennies, we're lighting up cigarettes and putting in dips. Chew. We're about to make it to the trailhead, and I swear, I could hear branches snapping behind us, like something was running after us and gaining. We make it into the clearing, race down the hill, slipping and sliding on the ice and snow, and make it to the Bronco. My boyfriend jumps right in, but I pause because something is different now. The woods are alive again. The birds are chirping, the ravens are playing, and the grouse are bellowing. I get into the car and we go home. We don't really talk about it when we get home, or really ever after that. I'm 24 now with 2 little girls, and I've told this story to my husband, who has grown up here his whole life. He thinks I was imagining it. And since I'm a tour guide at Glacier Gardens here in Juneau, I do tell the story from time to time on my tour. I haven't gone back to that trail since. If you're ever in Juneau, Alaska in the summertime, and want to hear the story firsthand, come to Glacier Gardens and ask for the Kansas Redneck. He'll point you in my direction. 2. I've always had interesting experiences, and by interesting I mean weird and sometimes very scary. I've become less afraid of the supernatural, much less afraid now that I'm older. In fact, my son seems to have a gift of seeing things many others can't, whereas I mostly just feel them or see them out of the corner of my eye. I never tell him he's lying or try to discourage his gifts, but instead just tell him that 1. Some just want to scare you, 2. Some just want to be seen and maybe don't know they've passed, and 3. Don't pay too much attention to them. We are in the world of the living, and that is where your focus should be. I say this because I don't want him to have that self-doubt that I did growing up and experiencing odd things. My earliest ghost encounter was when I was around 10 or so, and I would feel something jump onto the bed, and there would be nothing there. We always had cats, and lived right next to RT40, a local highway. The speed limit was 40 miles per hour, and we had our fair share of animals finding their end there, so ghost cats would sometimes jump up and lay down. Weird, but not scary. I was a teenager. I experienced scary sleep paralysis. This was much more frightening. My door was always closed to keep the streetlight out. I liked the pitch-dark room for sleeping and still do. So with the paralysis, I had this sense that something was trying to take over my body, and I would panic and frantically try to wake up. I thought I was awake and sitting in my bed, only to find myself laying down still and trying to wake up. I would go through that several times. It might be 20 times before I would finally really be awake, scared and shaking, sitting in my bed. How many times this occurred, I am not sure. It wasn't every night, but it was more than twice a year. They were so unsettling, I never told anyone about them until much later. One time, however, when I woke, my door was open halfway, and there was a jet-black figure standing there. It almost reached the ceiling, and the outline was bulky with a hood. I stared at it frozen, until it slowly faded away. I didn't go back to sleep that night. I never saw anything upon awakening any other time, but it was proof enough that something really was attacking me, Lots of other odd things happened in that house. I would hear footsteps on the porch. No one would be there. Footsteps in the house, same thing. Noises, rattling spoons in teacups, where no cat was in the room. None of it scared me, but that figure did. Years later, I was living in a different house, in a different state. This house was built in the 50s, had a large yard, a basement and 3 bedrooms upstairs and 2 downstairs. I had a few roommates, and at the time of this story, one of the rooms was open, and I had a guest sleeping in one of the basement rooms. I thought she would prefer it, but it turns out, after the first night, she asked to sleep in the living room. I said sure, but wouldn't you rather have the privacy downstairs and not have my nosy roommates waking you? She said that the noise would be much less up there, as she was kept up all night with the sound of what she described as a wah-wump, wah-wump, like a body falling down the stairs. She said she heard it all night. I don't know why she didn't just go sleep on the couch if it was waking her up, unless it was the fact she had to climb those stairs to get to it. I guess that could be intimidating. One day I saw a jet black figure at the bottom of the steps to the basement, and at first I thought it was a roommate. But there was no other living person downstairs. It was slim and moved fast. I saw the outline of hair. I later learned that my landlord grew up in that house, and I was not overly surprised to hear his brother died by falling down those stairs. 3. At the time of this story, I was 28 years old and living in a decent part of town in an apartment by myself. I worked a steady schedule, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., and then would go to the gym after work. I'm an ex-Marine and currently in the Army Reserves with a tour of duty in Iraq and 16 months working in Afghanistan as a security contractor. I keep up my physical fitness and, needless to say, I can handle myself pretty well. Across the street from my apartment was a street in my area called Front Street that was deemed as the more poor or poverty-struck section of town, but it never really bothered me. There was a beer distributor on the corner, Catty Corner, from my apartment as well. One night I was leaving the gym and decided to stop for a 12-pack of Michelob Ultra before getting to my apartment. I parked right outside the front door of the beer distributor and went inside. As soon as I walked in the door, I noticed an older, homeless-looking man sitting on a case of beer by the checkout counter. Almost immediately, he looked up and asked me where I lived. I said, nearby, why? He then asked if I could give him a ride to Front Street. I was puzzled by this. With the exception of crossing the street diagonally, we were practically on Front Street. But judging by how the man asked and his age and the fact he stank like booze, I figured he either couldn't walk far due to his health, or he was simply drunk. I hardly mumbled out my response of, yeah, I guess, before he was up and walking out the store towards my car. I shrugged it off and grabbed my 12-pack of beer and paid for it. I walked out of the store and opened my trunk and put the beer in, and closed it, when I noticed the old man was already sitting in my front passenger seat. I sat down in the driver's seat, not realizing I hadn't locked my car, and looked down. Between his legs was a bag. From what I saw, it looked like one of those reusable grocery bags, the cloth-like kind, with what looked like a 12-pack of beer and something else I couldn't see. He also kept his hand in his jacket pocket, which I didn't find strange at first. I drove my car to my apartment complex parking lot, which was only 2 buildings away, even closer to Front Street, and parked. The man didn't move. I said, okay, we're here. He practically yells at me that he can't walk across the street because of his feet and that I need to drive him there. I started the car just thinking he's some drunk old man with bad feet. He then begins directing me where to go. I swear I didn't drive more than 100 feet. He then instructs me to pull up in front of what looked like a cheap filthy apartment building, which I have seen plenty of times and always wondered who could possibly want to live there. I pull up and put my car in park. Again, the man doesn't move and still has his left hand in his jacket pocket. My spidey senses start to tingle. Something isn't right. He then begins to babble about some woman who bartends up the road, a ways at a bar he drinks at, and wants to make sure she gets home all right. While he's saying this, he's looking across the street at a house that's clearly empty. No lights on, no car out front. Only the porch light was on. He then says how he looks out for her and just wants to make sure she gets home fine, and wants to wait to see her walk in the front door. His left hand starts shuffling around in his pocket now, like he wants to take something out. He also begins fidgeting in the seat and hunching forward, almost like he's trying to get into a good position for something. I begin to think he has something, like a knife. I just had this odd feeling he was going to pull a small knife on me, and I couldn't shake it. I had to get out of the car and put some distance between him and I, gain some leverage, just to be safe. I thought quickly, trying not to accuse him or instigate anything, and make it seem like everything was fine, so I played into the drunk old man theory and quickly got out of the car and walked around to his door to assist him in getting out of my car. I opened his door and grabbed his bag from between his legs, and took a few steps back. He looked up at me, and then, after a quick moment, he got out of my car. To my surprise, he walked to the curb and I handed him his bag and got back in my car. But don't you know the old fuck runs up the small stoop to the front door of this apartment building and runs inside, as if he was completely capable of walking on his own the entire time. Maybe he had a knife and maybe he didn't. Maybe he thought he could pull it on me, but was second-guessing himself, or just trying to muster up the courage. Who knows? Both way, I never saw that old man again, and I hope I never do. 4. I am a 13-year-old boy, and short. I'm easily scared and home alone a lot. So I live in a trailer park and have a friend. Well, Frank and I stay the night at his house a lot, and if not stay the night, I stay late. But one day I was walking home from his house. It was around 1:20 a.m., so it was dark. I wasn't scared because I had always walked home from his house at night, but this time was creepy. As I was walking, I heard footsteps behind me. I forgot to mention I'm taking a shortcut I always take, near a lot of leaves. Anyways, I turned around and saw a shadow of a man standing 7 feet away from me. So I was frozen with fear. I turned around to run and I heard the man running at me. So being short, I'm also fast. I bolted out of there, then I could run. I was on my street when I turned and saw the man walking behind a house. So I ran to my house and slammed the door and locked it, and almost shit myself realizing I was home alone. But nothing happened, until a couple of hours at around 3:30 a.m. A knock on my window awoke me from my sleep. I was so damn tired I didn't bother to look, until I remembered what happened a couple hours ago. I looked and I saw a man's shadow outside my window blinds. At this point I was pretty much ready for this guy to break into my house. But luckily nothing happened for 30 minutes, and the guy walked away. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Thanks for listening to my story. I will say more if anything happens. Edit. That story was 4 months ago. I was skeptical about sending it, but after I left my friend's house again at 6:40 p.m., a man watched me the whole walk home. I didn't know the man, so I was shitting myself. Edit 2. Alright. I saw the same man again 3 days ago, and now I'm going to share my story. I'm not sure if the stories are related, but hell, better safe than sorry. 5. The duration of these events occurred while I was 18 and 19. I began dating a girl my junior year of high school. She was a friend for almost a year prior to dating, so I believed I knew everything about her. I began to notice that she craved the attention of other guys, as it seemed I was fighting off a different guy every other week. We fought pretty often, but somehow the relationship lasted nearly 2 years. Overall, the relationship was rather abusive. I had been slapped multiple times for simple disagreements that she blew out of proportions. But it all went downhill during the last 3 months. It started when she told me she was thinking about breaking up with me to be with another guy. I should have broken up with her then, but I was confused and really thought she could have been the one. Through the relationship, she made me lose a lot of friends, so I overall felt as if I may be alone if I left her. I continued trying for the relationship for another couple of months, but things spiraled out of control. I began college as a full-time student, while working 32+ hours a week as a night shift stalker for a retail company. Because of this, I had very little time to actually spend with her. And when I spent time with her, I would often find myself passing out. This pissed her off, and she began to act a bit psychotic. She would call and text me continuously while I slept before work, freaking out about why I wasn't replying to her messages. She'd also wind up showing up to the college campus if I didn't respond to her texts. I should add that she was in her senior year of high school when I began my college courses. And the high school was only a 3-minute drive down the road from college, so it wasn't a long drive by any means. This psychotic behavior got even worse when she began acting jealous towards a girl named Miranda, whom I shared one of my classes at college with. Her and I had been friends ever since I was about 7 or 8, and she was my sister's age, and had been friends with her their whole lives for the most part. She was more of another older sister to me, and she wasn't my style by any means. I was 18, but I didn't have my license at this time, so there were many times where Miranda would take me to a fast food place between her classes to grab something to eat before our 3-hour lab class. One day we went to grab something from Taco Bell, and in the 10 minutes it took us to get there and order food, I had around 20 missed calls and 5 unread texts from my ex asking why I wasn't at the college campus. When we got back to the campus, I saw my ex waiting at the table I usually sat at, in between my classes, and she was pissed. In an act of jealousy, she came up to me while I was talking with Miranda and kissed me, and attempted to make out with me while she was standing there. I had enough for the day and pushed her off of me and told Miranda that I'd see her in class. My ex was pissed off at me and stormed off, got in her car and drove off. I didn't have time to deal with this scenario, so I walked to class and went the day as if nothing was wrong. Now, my night shifts last from 11 p.m. at night until around 8 to 9 in the morning. My first class started at 9:30 in the morning, so I had time to get home, shower, and head to my first class. Along with this, I had a lab on Wednesday which lasted about 3 hours, so I'd be at the college from around 9:30 until 4 to 5ish in the afternoon. This was one of those days. Because I had worked the previous night into the morning, I hadn't been able to sleep. Once I got home, I crashed hard for about 5 or 6 hours. When I woke up, I had a large number of missed calls, texts, Skype messages, and calls from my ex. I finally replied and she told me to get on Skype, which we normally use to talk on. Once we connected, she was instantly pissed and crying, and I had enough. I told her that I was sick of this behavior, and that it was damaging me mentally and physically, since I wasn't able to get enough sleep when it was my days off. She told me that if I wanted to break up with her, then I should do it then and there. So I did. I ended a relationship of 2 years, with someone I thought I could spend the rest of my life with. I didn't want to do it over Skype. God, am I glad I did. She began sobbing and talking to herself, and then looked up at her camera and told me I wasn't allowed to. She repeated the line, "You're not allowed to break up with me," over and over, increasing in volume. I stuck to my guns though, and continued to say that we were over, and that I wasn't dealing with the relationship anymore. She began screaming and thrashing wildly. But what came next was what frightened me the most. She stopped sobbing and stared at the screen unblinking, and then began walking to the kitchen. Once there, she pulled out a knife and began a thrusting motion towards her neck. She stopped when I yelled at her to, and looked away. She kept yelling at me to look at the screen and watch her kill herself. But I told her that if she didn't put the knife down, that I'd hang up. She sat back down and I began telling her that maybe we could try it once I was less stressed out, whether it was in a couple of months or in 4 years when I got out of college. She seemed to calm down once I said this, and we agreed to end the relationship and attempt to be friends. All seemed well for a couple of weeks, and I felt a lot better. I was no longer in a relationship with someone who kept me from getting sleep. My grades increased, and I even performed better at my job. But then the behavior started again. She would come to campus randomly without any warning at all, and I'd wake up with tons of missed calls and messages from her. I gave her a final warning that if she did anything insane again, that I was going to block her from everything. When we were 1.5 years into the relationship, I bought her a ring. It was a customized ring and cost about $400, which may not seem like a lot, but I saved up for about 3 to 4 months when I only got around $8 a week at work to afford it. It actually caused one of our largest arguments, since the Valentine's Day came and I was unable to really afford an expensive gift. I took her out to a nice dinner, but I was only able to afford a dozen roses and some chocolate, even though the roses still cost about $30. She told me that I obviously didn't care about her nor the relationship, and that the ring meant nothing to her, and that she was willing to throw it into a river since it was pointless. Now, I've never been materialistic, but it pissed me off that I worked my ass off for 3 months, saving up all of my money, just so that I could afford to get her a nice ring that meant nothing to her. Anyways, back to the story. She texted me saying that she wanted to return it, since she didn't feel right about having it. I agreed to meet her outside of my lab for 5 minutes to take the ring, but that I had to get back to class. I met her outside of it and took the ring, but told her that I needed to use the bathroom. She attempted to hug me bye, but I walked away since I was done with her. By the time I got out of the bathroom, she was gone, so I continued my day as usual. My class lasted another 2 hours, and the entire time my phone was blowing up with calls and texts from her. It got so bad that I had to turn my phone off. After class, I texted her that I was done. I told her that I was blocking her on everything, and I did. I blocked her number, her Facebook, Skype, her Instagram account. I figured that was the end of it all and continued my day. I worked that night, so I fell asleep before work around 6 p.m. I awoke at 9 p.m. to get ready for work and noticed that I had 20 missed calls and about 15 missed texts from 2 numbers. One was her brother's phone, and the other I assumed was from her mom's. Great. Now they were helping her harass me. I blocked both of the numbers and began getting ready for work, when another number began spamming my phone again. It was her home phone. Are you fucking serious? Each voicemail was basically the same thing, her sobbing while begging me to come back, and talking about how much she missed me. I wasn't falling for it though, and blocked that number too. After that, everything seemed to calm down for about a month. But then I noticed her outside of my class a lot more. She wouldn't come into the buildings. Instead, she would wait outside at the tables that I'd normally sit at in between my classes. I started sitting at the tables at the back of the campus, since I knew she didn't know they existed. After about a week of avoiding her, she stopped showing up. A couple weeks passed without any incidents, and everything began to go back to normal. We had a mutual friend, let's call her Sam, who would talk to me about wanting information about the breakup. But all I'd say is that I decided I didn't like her anymore. I didn't want to ruin the image other people had of my ex, even if I found out she was spreading lies about me. She told some mutual friends that I had told her that I hated her, and even heard a couple people tell me that she was saying that I abused her. Which was a complete lie, of course. I ignored most of the texts that I got from people wanting more information about the breakup, and overall wanted it to disappear. And it did. Then came the day where I found out just how psychotic she was. It was a Thursday morning, so I just had class from 9:30 until 5 the previous day, and then had stayed up for a night shift. Because of this, I was totally drained when I got off work, since I had been up for nearly 24 hours. I woke up to my ex shaking me awake in my room and thought nothing of it. I sat up in my bed and continued a normal conversation with her, as if nothing was off. And it didn't hit me until I made her leave about 2 hours later, just how weird it was. I asked my mom how she got into my room, and it was creepy. She had apparently shown up to the house around 10:30 a.m. and began knocking at the door. My mom was in the shower, so my dad was the only one who heard her knocking, since I was passed out in my room. He let her knock for about an hour until my mom got out of the shower and decided to deal with it. She opened the door and let her into the house since she was crying. My mom is an extremely nice woman and wants to help out anyone whenever she can, even if they may not be deserving of the help. She complained and cried to my mom for about 20 minutes, and my mom told her that she'd let me know that my ex stopped by, but that I had worked the previous night, so I passed out and wouldn't be up until later in the afternoon. She asked if my ex wanted a drink, which she said yes to. They were in the dining room, and the fridge was only about 20 feet away, but by the time she turned around with a drink, my ex was already entering my room. My ex had been standing in the doorway when my mom tried to stop her. But my ex entered my room and shook me awake. When I began a normal conversation, my mom figured I had known she was coming over, but it was really just because of how sleep-deprived I was. Because of this event, I began looking into getting a restraining order against her, since I truly feared for my own safety. Now, I'm not a small guy. At that time, I stood about 6'1" or 6'2", and weighed around 220 to 230 pounds, and was into weightlifting. She was probably about 5'4" or 5'6", and was medium weight, but it was more of her psychotic behavior that scared me. She could have easily gotten into my room and stabbed me while I slept, and that freaks me out. I honestly had trouble sleeping for about a week after that happened. For a long time, that was the end of things. I'd get texts from Sam asking how things were going from time to time, but I knew they were really just from my ex texting me. I moved on and found my current girlfriend, someone I have known for most of my life, and I fell in love. A hurricane was going to hit our state around the end of 2016, and was determined that it could hit as high as a Category 4, which could destroy buildings. Because of this, I evacuated the state with my girlfriend and her family for a week. I had just received my license the day before we evacuated, and had purchased my first car a couple weeks prior. I had left it at my girlfriend's house when we evacuated, so her and I drove from her house towards mine, so I could see my family as I hadn't seen them in a week. On my way there, I received a text from Sam asking for help, stating that she was about 5 minutes from my house with my ex, and that they had a huge branch stuck under their car. I really didn't want to help, and it seemed fishy for them to be 5 minutes from my house in a rather desolated area at night. I thought they were attempting to lure my girlfriend and I, so I tried helping them by sending texts on what to do, but in the end we wound up driving to help them. When I got there, they were both sitting in the car, so I pulled up behind them and put on my high beams so I could see what they were talking about. I saw a decent-sized branch under their car, and they told me they had tried pulling it, backing up and driving forward, but that nothing would help. I grabbed a hold of the branch and pulled it back, and I was easily able to drag it from under the car. The stick wasn't stuck under the car or anything, and there were marks in the sand that made it seem as if they moved the stick under the car to lure me there. I told them that I moved the stick, and instantly got in my car and drove off quickly. They kept trying to get me to come back, saying that the engine sounded weird and that they didn't feel safe driving home. I told them that I couldn't help, and that they can either drive home or they can call it tow truck, and proceeded to turn my phone off. After that event, I started being a lot more cautious about the texts that Sam sent me. Maybe I was just being paranoid, but it honestly felt like a setup in an attempt to hurt my girlfriend and I. Luckily after that, she stopped harassing me. Sam will still text me every now and then, but it's always just to quickly catch up. It's nice to get this off my chest, and I apologize for the length, but I can only shorten about half a year of hell so much. Hopefully you enjoyed this story, and let it be a warning that you may not know who you're really dating. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Scary Subscriber Stories, episode 38. Thanks very much to everyone who sent the stories in for this video, very much appreciated. If you have a story you'd like to send me, please send it to kingofthecities@googlemail.com or kingofthecities@gmail.com. Either one works, they'll both get to me, pretty much, 2 rows to the same address. And you can also find that by clicking show more on any video. Scroll down to the bottom, the link's there. And if you're currently watching the video and not just listening, you can see it right there on the screen with all my Twitter information and everything else. Oh, I'd also like to say, because I noticed my view numbers were down this weekend, and I think that's just that little bug that YouTube has where not everyone gets notified. So if you'd like to make sure you're going to get notified, and if you have Twitter, you can just go follow @Hellfreezer on Twitter, and that will make sure, because you get notified when the videos go up, because they automatically show up in the feed. They're automatically posted as soon as the video goes live. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now. I'm going to go record Wednesday's video now. Pick 3 stories out for that. And so I'm going to say goodbye for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.